In this video, we're going to discuss user roles. We use user roles to enable specific functions for specific users. In this example here, you can see that we've got Jane, and Jane here is the account administrator. Account administrator pretty much can do whatever they want. They access all the functions here. They have no restrictions whatsoever to the contractors, candidates, contacts, or accounts that they can see. While this is a subject for a subsequent course, role ownership and record ownership, just for the moment understand that those controls over record ownership don't apply to an account administrator. For example, there is capability here for only specific users being able to see certain accounts, and specific users only seeing certain candidates and contractors. When we do put those controls in place, they will not apply to an account administrator. Think of account administrator as all powerful. So essentially that's made available by the settings menu. And you can see here that the account administrator can maintain any of the settings required to control the operation of the recruit's complete solution. So that's the account administrator. We also have the manager role. But before I talk about the different roles, let's just recap how we assign a role to a particular employee. We're not talking appointments, we're talking roles. So when you add a new employee to your system, you say which role are you going to give them, and there are 4 roles that you can choose from. As I say, the account administrator, all powerful, employee, manager, and recruiter. The employee is sort of different to every other role really, because they're just simply employees that you want to capture in your system that they themselves are not a manager or a recruiter and therefore don't need access to the solution. But you want to capture their master records and maintain their HR profile, for example. You can do that for your employee roles. Employees, when they log in, can only see themselves. They can't see anything else other than their own personal profile. So that's how you assign the roles initially to your employees. I'm going to show you later in the video how you can change those roles, because I'm no doubt they will change over time. So you add your employees and you give them a role. Jane, account admin, is all powerful. Let's now change to a manager. So we've got James Foster in our system here. I'm just going to switch to James Foster, and we're now accessing the system as though we are James. So the difference really, other than the record ownership, which again I talk about in a later video, but a manager doesn't have access to settings. Only your account administrator can manage the settings. Other than that, that's the single difference between your manager and account administrator. Again, I repeat, we'll talk about record ownership, because your account administrator can see all contacts, all contractors, all accounts. But you have the ability to restrict managers from only seeing certain records and restricting any role to particular records. But essentially the main difference between your account administrator, when we're ignoring record ownership, is they don't have the ability, the manager doesn't have the ability to modify the system settings. The manager definitely has access to the finance module, and it's in the finance module where you can view your invoices, credit notes, payroll, in other words, the financial analysis of your recruitment business. And it could be that there are some users, recruiters, for example, that you don't want to provide access to this kind of information. So then you don't make them a manager, you make them a recruiter. So the difference between a recruiter and a manager is that the recruiter doesn't have access to the finance module. So we'll just log in now as a recruiter. And finance module has disappeared, no access to it. This is the recruiter's personal profile, but they can still see the sales, they can still see contacts. But again, assuming there's no contact ownership controls in place, they then could be limited to your contractors, candidates, and so forth. But here is the main difference. The recruiter doesn't have access to the finance module. The manager has the finance module, as does your account administrators. So there's your sort of 3 main roles in your recruitment business: administrator, manager, and recruiters. Now let's just look. So we've got, of course, other roles. We've got your contractor role. So let's have a look at what a contractor role looks like. So we'll load up Andrew Hodgetts. So when the contractor logs into the system, well, they don't get in. Of course, they don't get functions for sales or recruitment or so forth. This is their personal portal. This is where they can see their tasks. They can see any appraisals and assessments due, their documents. They can view their roster schedule. Not sure if this person's got any rosters, but they would see, here we are, so you can see their schedule, and they can also manage their timesheets and can manage their conversations. So this is the contractor role. Then of course we have the candidate role. So let's look at what a candidate looks like. So now we're logged in as a candidate. Very similar to your contractor role, but primarily the main difference is they don't have conversations and they don't have access to timesheets, because clearly if they're a candidate, they're not yet working for you and therefore have no need to be able to manage timesheets. They do have the schedule, of course, but the schedule's different. The schedule is only for them to maintain their availability. Maybe maintaining availability is important for making them more appropriate candidate for a given job. So this is the candidate's view. And then finally we have the customer view. This is what, so let me just pop back as my account administrator and talk a little bit about that. When we set up our accounts, our customers that we're going to provide labour to, we do so in our accounts menu, so here. And then so if we look at Barnaby Acute Services, this has got Brenton Balding as a contact of Barnaby Acute Services, and so is Kirk Donner. So we want to give access to Brenton to be able to view jobs, view the schedule, and manage timesheets. So what we'll do is we'll log in as our example customer and see what they see. So here I'm logging in as Brenton, Agent Client Manager. I can view the roster. So here's the roster. These are the employees that have been allocated jobs being filled for Brenton and Barnaby Acute Services. So this is Brenton's view. Brenton can open up here and he can see the invoice calculations that he's being charged for, and he can also see any timesheets for contractors that have been applied, provided to jobs for Barnaby Acute Services. So there's your example of your client role. And whenever you add a client, it automatically creates the role for them. You don't need to do anything. It's a default role. So from a subscription perspective, you do not need to pay for your employee roles or your agent client roles. It's purely only managers, recruiters, and administrators do you pay subscription fees for. So again, just repeating, when we added our employees, we decided what role we were going to give them here. And when we add our contacts for our customers, they get that agent client role automatically. But you can manage that. If you are the administrator, you can manage those roles. So if we look in here and look in the settings and I go to my user management, I can see that Jane Smartin is my account administrator. I can see that James Foster and Hamish Jones are managers, and I can see that Edward Paul is a recruiter. Now I can change this. So maybe, for example, Edward gets promoted and we want to give him access to manager role. Well, it's as simple as removing here, going to manager, going new, and adding Edward as a manager now. So then the next time Edward logs in, Edward is going to have access to the finance menu because he's now accessing it as the manager role. No restrictions whatsoever. You can move them, change them in out according to the roles that you want to assign to them. So yeah, there is your roles. So just repeating, you've got your account administrator, can pretty much all powerful, do anything. A manager, very much the same as account administrator, but has no access to maintain the settings of your solution. The recruiter, the same as the manager, except doesn't have any access to the finance menu, so can't see invoicing, payroll data. Your contractor can see everything about themselves, including managing timesheets and their schedule. Candidates don't have the access to timesheets, probably the only single difference between them and your contractor roles. And then finally, your customer. So each time you add a candidate of your customer, the customer gets a user role. They can then log in and view jobs for their customer, and they can also see any timesheets for jobs that have been provided that require their approval. So there's the concept of roles in Recruit Complete. Thank you very much.